Hello and welcome to Dangerous Doctrine. Today we had another exciting episode of Bible Study Live. In case you missed it, check out this excerpt. But the things that God has entrusted us with, when we use it for His glory, He takes it personally. He takes it very, very personally. I want to draw your attention now to Matthew chapter 25. You should probably be thinking when you hear Matthew 25, this is towards the end of Jesus' ministry. There are lots of things that are happening in those last few chapters of Matthew as Jesus is looking forward to going to the cross. This is what is on his mind. He has set his sights on Jerusalem and he is headed in that direction. So Matthew 25, Jesus tells a parable that we get a chance to take very literally. We get to take this parable very literal. And I encourage you to take a direct approach of interpretation. Matter of fact, don't interpret it, just obey it. So Matthew chapter 25, I think if you pick it up in verse 31, we're gonna skip around a little bit, but this parable is known as the sheep and the goats. The sheep and the goats. And the context here, for those who may be unfamiliar, is that at the end of time, Jesus will come and judge the world. He will decide who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. And here's an example of how seriously he takes giving. So I wanted to skip around. I ultimately want to get to verse 40, but this parable is so important. It's so powerful. And I need to be reminded of it. And perhaps you need to be reminded of it. So this is what we're going to discuss. I'll pick it up in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." How practical is each and every one of these steps? There doesn't seem to be anything religious about it. No mention of church service. No mention of how many Bible verses you memorize. No mention of your education. No mention of how much money you made. No mention of how pretty you were. No mention of how popular you were. None of the things that we hold in high regard, religious people or non-religious people, this is extremely practical. Jesus is saying, I was in this situation, and here's what you did for me. We're talking about giving this morning. Watch this. Verse 37, then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" Now, this is also a very valid question, because these are regular people, you and me. These are people. Jesus is saying, when I was in this situation, you took care of me. You did these things for me. And they're like, when did we see you in that situation? And I want you to put yourself in this mindset, because this Bible verse is 100% applicable to you and me. You right now, as you're watching on the Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube later, when have you seen Jesus hungry? You say, okay, I'm looking for a guy with brown shoulder length hair. He's got a beard. He may or may not have like this kind of glowing halo thing, might be dragging a cross, maybe a purple sash, depending on my particular denomination, may or may not have holes in his hands, depending on this is pre-resurrected Christ versus post-resurrected Christ. I'm not exactly sure. What are you talking about? When did we see you like that? You should ask yourself the same question. When have I seen Jesus in this situation? Because this is the basis for judgment. Here's the answer. And this is where I want to get to. Verse 40. The king will reply, I tell you the truth. Now, let me pause. Can God lie? I need you guys to answer me that question. It's not rhetorical. It's an easy question. It's almost rhetorical, but I want you to say it. Can
No,
God lie?
No, sir.
No. God cannot lie. He defines truth. So whatever he says, even if it wasn't that way, it will be that way as soon as he says it. He defines truth. God cannot lie. The king will reply, I tell you the truth. So when someone who can't lie says, I'm telling you the truth, you really need to pay attention. If you're into that old school King James, your translation might say, verily, verily, I say unto thee. When you hear that, like truly, truly, like, whoa, watch out. Someone who can't lie is telling you, like, seriously, I'm telling you the truth. Watch what he says next. He says, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Now we're talking about giving this morning. What's the basis that he uses for the sheep and the goats, at least in this parable, at least in this particular account?
Giving, helping.
That's exactly right.
But the least of these, but also the least of these, not just somebody who has everything already.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I hope that you will join us each Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. Follow us on Facebook at One Dangerous Doctrine.